Welcome back everyone to another game of Pokemon Auto Chess. As the title suggests, this is the game that broke me into the top 100 leaderboard, which I've been pushing for a few weeks now with plenty of ups and downs. I pushed up to about 1290 or 1297 elo and then had a really bad set of games and tilted really badly, like all the way back down to 1160, took a little bit of a break, and then pushed myself back up to the 1280s, 1290s to put myself in position of this game to potentially break into the top 100. I was very happy to start with 2 Geodude and hit a ground region here. I liked ground a lot before the changes in 6.5 and have struggled with it a bit since. Lately though, I've been playing ground games based on Grom's guide and the compositions feel a lot better. Instead of going tanky to give your ground units time to scale up, getting crit items and attacking items fits ground's current playstyle a lot better since you get the stat buffs at the start of the round instead of building them up throughout the round. I spend my PvE rounds getting my initial ground board set up. I'm checking what my opponents are purchasing from the shop and keeping a mental note of how many other ground units are in play, since this will dilute the unit pool. The idea with ground is to start digging holes ASAP, which means leveling up early to level 4 and level 5 to get the board dug out faster. The ground power spike at level 8 with 2 fully dug rows can be enough to win games. And then at the first item carousel, I grab a heart scale. This just complements the items I already have. I can go Flame Orb Fluffy Tail now for damage. I could even go Rocky Helmet to help defend crit comps, or now I'm holding multiple crit items potentially to start a crit build for myself. Because I lack evolutions at this point just because of how my shop played out, I decide to go ahead and lose streak early. I don't want to do any rolling to try to force a win streak because my economy will end up in a very bad spot with leveling up early to get the extra ground holes dug. At the first ad pick, I grab a magnet. This sets me up for turn 10. If I happen to get Gligar, then I can immediately evolve it to Gliscor. Then I position out of my dug holes because if I run into the baby player, I'm hoping that with 2 Mudkips, I can lose to the baby player if they don't have any of the ground stat buffs. Otherwise, I spend the next couple rounds losing. In stage 6, I get a Ditto in the shop, but I decide to just skip it because at this point, I just need to get as many ground units on the board as possible. Doesn't matter if they're evolved or not, and Ditto would just take up a slot in my shop that could be ground units instead. On turn 7, I level up to level 5 to get an extra ground hole started, but I'm still lose streaking. On turn 8, I get an evolution and some better ground units in the shop, so I decide to start trying to win streak, or at least have closer losses to prevent bleeding too much HP. I slam a Flame Orb and Fluffy Tail onto Marshtomp, knowing that I will sell it later to move those items to a more powerful unit. I won the Gyarados round no problem with my team, and we get a Mystic Water from it. And then when we get to turn 10, I'm able to easily grab a ground portal, and I do end up getting Gligar as a unique, which means my magnet pick from earlier paid off. Now, normally I would have moved the Flame Orb and Fluffy Tail to my turn 10 pick. However, because Gligar's ability poisons itself to heal, I don't want to make it immune to poison with the Fluffy Tail. So I just decide to keep the items on Marshtomp and I'll move them later. Gliscor won't ever dig any holes aside from on PvE rounds, since the point of him will just be to carry and mitigate damage as best he can from the fully dug hole. Even if I don't start winning immediately, close losses are still fine because I'll keep my loss streak money, and that's what happens on turn 10. The Magmarizer Varoom just scales up, and with that attack speed, it's able to take care of business alongside the support from the Ice Pokemon. But close loss means I don't really lose that much HP, and I get to keep my loss streak money. At the ad pick, I grab a Miracle Seed to put a Stardust on Gliscor for some more sustain. There's not much else to craft out of the Mystic Water for the ground, and I didn't want to make a Soul Dew at this point with the Pokemon I had. Turn 11, Quillfish and Golbat put in work against me, as my only real reliable source of damage currently is Gliscor, and even though I'm getting low on HP, I'm still okay with close losses for the extra gold, because I know I can hit a big power spike at level 8, so the sooner I can get there and roll down, the better. At the item carousel, I decide to go for another Black Glasses. This gives me the option for another Fluffy Tail, as I've noticed there are a couple of poison teams at this point, and there's some ice, or I can hold it and make a crit item later on. This matchup is against the Hyper Roll Bug team. However, outside of the Orbital, it looks like the Hyper Rolling didn't really pay off, as there is still a Metapod and a Kakuna on the field. And because Metapod is holding an extra item, the Heracross doesn't end up getting cloned. Gliscor is pretty easily able to shrug off the lack of damage and wins the round on its own. So while I lose my loss streak, I do get to start preserving a little bit of HP. Next up is a very, very weak wild team with no evolutions. Zeraora is able to pick off a few units, but ultimately it isn't enough, and Gliscor cleans up the battle with no issue. At the start of turn 14, my ground units dig up a Dragon Gem and a Poison Gem, which can be very, very good for my late game, as I would only need something like Gibble and Vibrava to activate Dragon 3 synergy, and then since I have Gliscor, I would only need one of the Nidorans to activate Poison synergy, or I could even get a Dragalge and check both off with one Pokemon. From the Mew encounter, I get a Black Glasses, and I end up picking Twisted Spoon as my item, since it gives me access to Reaper Cloth if I want to go that route, or I can potentially work towards grabbing a Soul Dew for my legendary pick. Then comes a Dark team with a fully evolved and fully itemized Aggron. The Stunky gets a really good gas trail that effectively neutralizes half of my team, and Aggron cleans up with basically no issue at all. Against the Fire team, the Turtonator ends up getting stacked up very, very quickly, and Gliscor ends up being heavily targeted. The Houndour at the start of the battle pulled my Marshtomp away, and the backliners were able to make quick work everywhere else. Another loss, and HP is starting to become a big concern, so once I get to level 8, I'm definitely rolling down and really stabilizing and hitting my big power spike. At the carousel, I do go ahead and grab a Mystic Water, so I can create potentially a Scope Lens for Gliscor. This combos well with the Razor Fang and Stardust that are already equipped. Afterwards, I level up to level 8 and start rolling down. With 31 HP, it is time to get stronger and start turning the game around. I did end up forgetting to equip the Scope Lens, and I end up going against another Poison team. The Poison ticks my units down very, very quickly, and Coughing gets a great cast that nullifies quite a few of my units. So even with level 8, I'm not quite there yet in terms of power. I am able to get a Boltoy out of the shop, and I add it in to get an Electrolyzer, which I'll throw on my backline Wormadam. I know I can take one more narrow loss, but it really is time to start stringing together some wins. I match up against another lower health player who is running an Artificial and Ice team, but outside of the Castform and itemized Piloswine, there's not much threatening my ground team here. During the round, I rolled down to 0 to finish stabilizing my team, and then we'll add in the legendary at turn 20. The team is starting to take shape here as we get to the Ho-Oh and Lugia fight. I have a Ditto in the shop that I can save for later to use, and also a Camerupt, so we are starting to get these weaker ground units replaced with some stronger ones. At the Legendary Carousel, I hop into a ground portal, and I am able to grab Groudon. So with the item components I have, I finally make that Scope Lens for Gliscor. Then I transfer that Flame Orb and Fluffy Tail combo to Groudon. I also go ahead and make a Soul Dew for Groudon, since I have the components for it, and Groudon can have very, very powerful ability casts that are definitely going to take advantage of that Soul Dew more than any other unit on my team. Finally, I make one last Fluffy Tail to help against the Poison and the Ice to put on Camerupt, and then I do some slight repositioning to have my stronger units help tank for my backline units. We instantly see the payoff of the Fluffy Tails as I go against one of the Poison teams. Quillfish jumps to the backline and can only take care of the Wormadam clone, while Groudon and Gliscor take care of business elsewhere. My front line holds strong and neither Fluffy Tail holder goes down. Turn 21, we encounter the Bug Hyper Roll team again, who has managed to get Beedrill and Butterfree. However, they are only level 6 and my ground 8 synergy is just too strong for them at this point. The melee bug clones spawn in a really bad spot and have to walk far around the battle. Camerupt and Gastrodon tank a ton of damage while the combo of Groudon and Gliscor clean up yet again. With so many melee heavy teams in this match, I decide to grab a Sticky Barb at the item carousel. Almost all of my ground units will be fighting at melee range, and the ground 8 buff is currently giving them all plus 25 defense, so the Sticky Barb will provide lots of retaliation damage. I also decide to sell off my bench units to reach 40 gold. While it may be a little risky, pretty much the only avenue for making my current team better is by evolving Baltoy into Claydol or finding a Rhyhorn in the shop. I feel like my current team is strong enough to survive long enough for me to push to level 9, which would allow me to potentially splash Poison 3 or Dragon 3 into the team, or to just add an Ultra unit on top of what I have. In the battle, we draw the Wild team with all unevolved Pokemon aside from the Unique and Legendary. Camerupt's Sticky Barb is already put to good use as it just about takes out 3 units on its own, and the buffed up ground stats make this a pretty easy fight. Here is another melee heavy team with a dark composition. Camerupt and Gastrodon do a good job taking out Sableye, while most of the other units are able to knock out that Aggron that gave me trouble in the past. Arceus tries its best to essentially 1v4, but Gliscor has way too much shield built up from the Stardust and is able to finish off the Arceus. As we get to the Legendary Birds PvE fight, I am continuing to work my way towards level 9. We end up getting a red orb from the PvE fight, so I throw it on Wormadam to give it an attack buff alongside the speed buff from the Electrolyzer. Then I level up to level 9, throw in a Happiny for some extra shielding, and evolve Baltoy into Claydol. Next, we go up against another Poison team, where the Fluffy Tails pay off once again. Camerupt's Sticky Barb did a lot of damage, and then is able to get a big cast off before getting knocked out. My frontline carries tanked plenty of damage, while my backliner sat right behind them to clean this one up. I end up swapping Happiny out for Ghastly, which allows me to splash in Poison 3 and Ghost 2 synergies. Then, the fight against this Poison team goes essentially the same way as last time. Coolfish jumps to my backliners, while my carries take care of everything else. Groudon gets a couple of big ability casts off, and we were pretty much never threatened by this team. After a bit of hesitation at the item carousel, I check the synergies of my remaining opponents and decide to go for the Rune Shield to further counter the poison. However, I end up hesitating too long and it gets taken, so I just go ahead and grab a Punching Glove to put on Wormadam. I do some more rolling and end up replacing Ghastly for Goomy. I figured the Aquatic 2 synergy might help out a bit more than the Poison 3. However, during all this, I never repositioned and never checked for the Dark team, and Arceus jumps directly into my backline to wreak havoc. Arceus then cleans up a 1v3 in a very narrow loss, but thankfully, the positioning didn't cost me the game as I survived with just 3 HP. The Legendary Beasts PvE round comes and goes, and I grab an Assault Vest from my item selection because of the Poison teams. Without thinking too much, I monkey brain the Assault Vest onto Camerupt since it has 2 items and has been another tank for me. But with the Fluffy Tail, Camerupt is already immune to poison, so the Assault Vest doesn't really end up doing that much, and I should have put it on a different unit to reduce the poison damage on them. I reposition my backline units in case I go against the Ghost of the Dark player, as I think I can take down the Arceus if my best units team up against it instead of it taking out my backline. Instead, I end up facing the Ghost of the Poison player, but my repositioning pays off anyways. Stun Tank and Overqwil jump to the backline, but are met with much stronger units than Wormadam and Claydol. The other frontliners hold up long enough for Groudon to reposition and get a huge cast off. From there, the rest of my team can clean up the Eternatus and Dragapult. I find a second Ditto in the shop, so I'm able to get myself an Ursaring, as I figure that's my best unit I can get now since I've still not seen a Rhyhorn. I end up replacing Gastrodon so I can keep the Aquatic 2 synergy. I also noticed the Poison player took out the Dark player, so I switched my positioning back to the way it was. This pays off as Stun Tank and Overqwil don't end up jumping to my backline. Groudon is able to survive on low HP for long enough to keep the damage off of Wormadam, who is able to clean up the round nicely. Finally, I am able to find Rhyhorn in the shop, but I'm wondering if it's too late, and I had just used both of my Dittos onto Teddy Ursa. I don't have the money to evolve it into Rhydon, and I don't end up putting Rhyhorn in the field, which I wonder if it would have been better than Ursaring because it would have activated the Monster 2 synergy for Groudon. Then I reposition my team so Groudon and Gliscor can engage the bulk of the units right away, but I didn't properly consider the Stun Tank, who gets a huge dash across the field and effectively renders my backline useless. From there, it's an easy cleanup for the Poison team, and I finish second place, but let's cut to the live reaction. Probably not going to be enough. Oh, 1300. That might be top 100. That might be top 100. Oh. Let me refresh this. Oh, I'm right there. I'm right there. So I'm tied at top 100. No way. This guy hasn't played since the 16th. Come on, they gotta give it to me. No. This guy last played on the 10th. This guy last played on the 13th. Come on. It was at $12.99 earlier, so I know the cutoff is like right around here. Oh man. But don't worry, everyone. I played the scared game and it paid off. Instead of queuing up for another game, I knew I at worst was tied for top 100, so I figured I would wait a day, see if any elo decay kicked in or if any of the players near me lost elo, and that is indeed what happened. So I was able to make it onto the top 100 leaderboard at spot number 100. However, I didn't want to rely on that, so I queued up for another game and finished 8th place and lost horribly and lost a bunch of elo. So of course I couldn't let that decide my top 100 journey. I ended up queuing up for another game and thought about recording it to hit a quote-unquote real top 100 game, but I didn't because it is very hard to play and commentate and stuff at the same time, at least commentating my thoughts even for a post-com like this. However, that game ended up going super well, beat a very good lobby in first place, got to 1303 elo, and was firmly into the top 100, not tied with anyone else. And then I ended up playing another game and did really good in that and ended up peaking at top 65, which is where I currently sit at the time of making this video. I am very happy to have made this. It's been a goal of mine for a few weeks now once I really felt like I started getting good at and understanding the game well. So very happy to have it pay off and get into the top 100, and hopefully we can keep on pushing higher from here. Thanks for watching.